Chapter 1, Night 1, The Key That Crawls Inside. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Some of you have been with me since the early days, back when I was just reading creepypastas in my apartment with a cheap headphones. Others found me through the Disturbing Iceberg series that somehow blew up overnight. Either way, thank you for showing up tonight. What you're about to hear is different. This is not a list. This is not found footage reenactment. This is the raw, unedited audio diary of Dr. Elias Crow, recorded inside the Vatican Secret Archives across 14 nights in October 2024. He mailed the recorder to me from Rome the morning he disappeared. No return address, as no note. Just blood on the packaging and a single post-it that read, "Play them in order. Do not skip. Do not stop." I've listened to all 14 nights, some parts twice, some parts I wish I could unhear. Tonight we begin with night 1, turn the lights off, use headphones, and whatever you do, don't pause when the screaming starts, because it isn't acting. October 13th, 2024, 23:47. This is Dr. Elias Crow, recording on a Zoom H6 I bought duty-free at Fiumicino because the Vatican wouldn't let me bring anything with cloud sync. Smart bastards. I'm standing in the Sala di Consultazione Segreta, the inner reading room that doesn't appear on any public map. The air is 12 degrees Celsius and smells like candle smoke, old bones, and something coppery underneath, like a butcher's shop that's been consecrated instead of cleaned. The doors just sealed, not with a dramatic clang, but with a sigh, a long, slow exhale, as if the entire building had been holding its breath since 1963 and finally decided I was worth letting go for. I thought I would feel like Indiana Jones. I feel like a communion host that just realized it's about to be swallowed. The Swiss guard who escorted me didn't speak. He simply stared straight ahead while the lock turned from the outside. His pupils were perfect circles, too perfect, like someone had drawn them with a compass. When the bolt slid home, he whispered something under his breath. I'm almost sure it was Latin, but the accent was wrong, too guttural, like Latin spoken backward through a throat full of gravel. On the desk is the only item I was told to bring, a brass key delivered to my hotel yesterday morning. No envelope, just the key and a strip of vellum that smelled of myrrh and slow decay. The handwriting on the vellum looked disturbingly like mine, as if I'd written it in a trance and forgotten. Clavis carnis, clavis cordis, usque ad mortem sequitur, key of flesh, key of heart. It will follow you to death. I laughed when I read it. The kind of laugh you make when you're alone and trying to convince yourself the dark is empty. The key is heavier than physics allows, Renaissance or older. The bow is a cherub's mouth frozen mid-scream. Under the green banker's lamp, I can just make out the inscription worn almost smooth, Lux in tenebris lucet, et tenebrae eam non comprehenderunt. Someone added a correction in fresh black ink. Not yet. 23:59. I close my fist around the key. It's warm, too warm, like it's been lying against someone's chest for hours, waiting, and then it moves, not melts, moves, like a living thing uncoiling after centuries of pretending to be metal. The first sensation is pressure, a cold needle kissing the center of my palm. Then pain ignites, bright and intimate, racing up my fingers in perfect fractal branches along every line of my hand, lifeline, heart line, the faint white scar from the night I tried to run from the seminary at 16 and the brothers dragged me back by the hair. I try to open my fingers. They won't obey. The brass liquefies, pouring between them like molten honey that refuses to fall. It clings, it crawls, it drinks. I slam my arm against the marble table, once, twice. Bone makes a wet crunch. The golden liquid doesn't even ripple. I seize the silver letter opener, pious the Tuminita's own, still warm with a blessing that suddenly feels like a joke, and drive it into my forearm to the hilt. The blade sinks clean, no arterial spray, only a soft golden spurt that immediately seals the wound behind itself, like flesh knitting over a secret it never once told. The pain is loving, surgical. It is tasting me, learning the exact salt content of my fear. I tear my shirt open. Buttons scatter across the floor like startled birds. Golden veins spread across my chest in the exact pattern of the Vatican's underground tunnels, the ones on maps that are supposed to be burned after reading. I know. I've memorized them the way other men memorize lovers. It reaches my sternum, a wet, intimate pop behind the ribs. It has arrived for one heartbeat. My heartbeat. There is silence. Then my heart skips, literally skips, the way a needle drags across vinyl when it resumes. There are two rhythms, mine and its, perfectly synchronized, yet its beat comes half a second early, leading the dance like a partner who already knows every step I'm about to take. Each pulse pushes a syllable through my arteries, lux, in, stena, bris, faster, faster, until the words lose meaning and become pure percussion inside my skull. A second heart made of language. I fall. The marble is cold against my cheek. I claw at my chest until nails snap and skin peels back in wet ribbons. Beneath, a bruise blooms. A perfect key-shaped welt. The head of the key pressing outward like something impatient to be born. Slowly, gently. It breaks through the skin with a soft, wet sound. 1 centimeter. 2. The cherub mouth is smiling now. It begins to rotate, clockwise. Each click a tooth in a lock, turning somewhere deep inside me. Click. Vision tunnels. Click. Frankincense turns to rotting lilies and semen. Click. I taste copper. Click. Fourth turn. The key sinks back flush, leaving only the scar. Then the light begins. A thin beam of gold shoots from the wound, straight up, striking the frescoed ceiling. It writes, burning the words into centuries-old plaster, while smoke curls like incense. Noctis prima alias Crow, electus est ostium apertum. Night 1, Elias Crow, chosen. The door is open. The beam snaps off. The temperature drops another 5 degrees. I lie on my back, gasping, shirt in tatters, chest bleeding soft golden light. In the polished marble I see my reflection. My pupils are gone, only keyholes remain, and something looks out through them. Sodium 41. I crawl to the recorder. My sternum burns where the device is pressed, as if the plastic is trying to fuse with bone. My voice comes out layered, 2 men speaking the same sentence a heartbeat apart. It's inside, I whisper. It's measuring me, learning how fast my blood runs when I'm terrified, how much pain I can take before I beg. A wet laugh escapes me. It likes the taste. I manage one last coherent sentence, before the pain folds me in half. If you're still listening, tell me in the comments what you would have done. Would you have touched the key or would you have run? Because I think very soon it is going to want to know your name too. The Vatican bell tolls once, the key answers. My spine arches off the floor like a bow drawn for war. When I come down, the bruise has become a brand, and deep inside my chest, something has turned the first tooth of a lock that has waited since 1963. Night one is over, but the key is just getting started, and somewhere in the dark, something whispers back, in my voice, "Welcome home. Doctor, we've been waiting." Long silence filled only with breathing like broken bellows. Then a soft, wet click as the recorder is pressed against skin that is no longer entirely human. The beam of light faded, leaving only the afterimage burned into my retinas, a golden scar across the frescoed cherubim above, their painted smiles now twisted into something knowing, something amused. I lay there on the cold marble, chest heaving in ragged bursts that weren't entirely my own, the air thick with the scent of scorched plaster and something sweeter underneath, like overripe fruit left too long in a confessional booth. My skin prickled as the temperature plummeted further, the kind of cold that seeps into bones and whispers memories you thought you'd buried deep. I forced myself up on one elbow, the recorder still clutched in my blood-slicked hand, its red light blinking like a solitary eye in the dim glow of the emergency lamps. The room looked the same, endless shelves vanishing into shadow, rows of ancient tomes bound in leather that suddenly seemed too soft, too much like skin, but everything felt tilted now, as if the archives had shifted a fraction on some unseen axis. The silence pressed in, heavier than before, broken only by the wet thud of my heart. No, our heart, echoing in my ears. I glanced down at the brand on my chest. The key-shaped scar pulsed faintly, a dull ember beneath the skin, and with each throb, a faint warmth spread outward, tracing veins that glowed subtly before fading. It wasn't pain anymore. It was presence, a companion settling in, stretching its limbs inside my rib cage, testing the space like a new tenant measuring curtains. I could feel it exploring, probing the chambers of my heart, brushing against valves with the curiosity of fingers turning pages in a forbidden book. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind, but beneath it lurked something worse, fascination. I'd spent years chasing whispers of the Vatican's hidden horrors, the suppressed third secret of Fatima, the alleged satanic enthronement in the Pauline Chapel back in 1963 that some ex-Jesuits like Malachi Martin swore was real, even if historians dismissed it as paranoid fantasy. I'd laughed at the conspiracy theorists, the ones claiming Lucifer himself had been invited into the heart of the church during a secret rite coinciding with Paul VI's reign. But now, with this thing coiled around my aorta, pulsing in perfect, mocking rhythm, I wondered if those whispers weren't warnings after all. I staggered to my feet, legs trembling like a foal's first steps, and stumbled toward the nearest shelf. My free hand reached out instinctively, fingers brushing the spine of a volume labeled Acta Apostolicae Sedis, Anno 1963. The leather was warm, too warm, as my skin made contact. A jolt shot through me, not electricity, but memory. Flashes that weren't mine, shadowed figures in red robes circling an altar, incense thick as fog, a low chant in reversed Latin rising like steam from a cauldron. A man in white, Paul Sixtus himself, kneeling as something vast and winged descended from the chapel dome, wings made of smoke and screaming faces. I yanked my hand away, gasping. The vision snapped off, leaving me staring at my reflection in the polished brass of a nearby reading stand. My face was pale, sweat slicked, eyes wide with the wild gleam of a man who'd just glimpsed the abyss and found it staring back with familiarity. But it was the scar that held my gaze, the way it shifted subtly, the cherub mouth seeming to widen in a grin that mirrored the ones on the ceiling frescoes. "What are you?" I whispered to it, my voice cracking, layered still with that unnatural echo. The key answered with a pulse, stronger this time, sending a wave of heat blooming through my torso. It felt pleased, like a cat purring at a stroke. I backed away from the shelf, heart, our heart, racing in erratic bursts that left me dizzy. The room spun for a moment, and in that vertigo, I remembered my childhood, not the polished seminary stories I told at dinner parties, but the real ones, the nights in the Jesuit novitiate when I was 15, locked in the chapel for discernment exercises. The older brother who'd taken a special interest in me, his hands cold as marble under my cassock, whispering that pain was the key to divine union. I'd run then, bleeding from places I never confessed, swearing I'd uncover the church's rot from the outside. And now here I was, 38 and accomplished, thinking I was the hunter. But the key knew better. It had waited for someone like me, broken just enough to let it in. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor into my bones. The shelves groaned, wood creaking like old joints in the cold. Books shifted on their own, spines aligning with faint clicks, forming patterns I couldn't yet read. One volume tumbled free, landing open at my feet, yellowed pages, illuminated manuscript from the 14th century, depicting a knight pierced through the chest by a golden arrow shaped exactly like my scar. Beneath the illustration, in faded ink, clavis intrat et homo fit ostium, the key enters, and man becomes the door. I knelt, compelled, fingers hovering over the page. The moment I touched it, another flash, not vision this time, but sensation, the taste of ash on my tongue, the smell of burning flesh mingled with frankincense, screams echoing in a chapel filled with cardinals whose faces melted like wax, and at the center, a throne empty but waiting, draped in white silk, stained with something dark and viscous. I recoiled, scrambling backward until my spine hit the desk. The recorder clattered as I fumbled for it, pressing it closer to my lips, as if speaking could anchor me to reality. "It's communicating," I rasped, voice hoarse from screams I didn't remember releasing. Not words, feelings, hunger. It's been waiting so long, starved in that brass form, and now it's feeding on me, on my doubts, my guilt. A pause. My breathing filled the mic, wet and ragged, interspersed with soft thumps, the key turning another invisible notch. I thought I was here to expose the truth, the real history behind the rumors, the 1963 rite that some say paralleled a similar ceremony in South Carolina. A dual enthronement to crown the prince of this world right under the church's nose. Historians argue it was allegory, Martin's ravings. But This thing pulsing inside me, it remembers. The hum grew louder, the shelves trembling now, dust sifting down like grave soil. In the distance, far along the 85 kilometers of corridors, a door creaked open, slow, deliberate. Footsteps echoed, bare feet on stone, dragging something heavy. I froze. The footsteps stopped, then started again, closer. If you're hearing this, I continued, voice dropping to a whisper that trembled with raw terror, and you've felt something off since starting this recording. A warmth in your chest, a pull. Stop now. Delete it. Because it's not just in here with me, it's reaching through the sound, through you. Another pulse from the key, stronger, sending me to my knees again. Pleasure mixed with agony this time, a twisted ecstasy that made me arch and gasp. It's happy. I choked out. We're connected now, and whatever's coming down those halls, it's the welcome party. The footsteps resumed, faster, accompanied by a wet, dragging sound and a low, rhythmic chant in a language that hurt to hear. I clutched the recorder like a lifeline, blood from my torn chest smearing the casing. Night one isn't over yet. God help me. What have I unlocked? The chant grew closer, voices multiplying, dozens, hundreds, whispering my name in perfect unison. Elias, Elias, come deeper. The key throbbed in ecstatic approval, and in the shadows between the shelves, shapes began to move. On Chapter 2, Night 2, the Codex that eats faces. The footsteps from the endless corridors never arrived. They simply faded, like a nightmare dissolving at the edge of waking, leaving only the echo of dragged chains and that rhythmic chant lingering in my ears long after silence reclaimed the room. I didn't sleep. How could I? The key, my unwelcome tenant, pulsed steadily now, a second heartbeat that lulled me into uneasy trances where visions flickered at the periphery, shadowed chapels and inverted crosses, a throne waiting in white silk, stained black. Dawn came eventually, the great doors unlocking with a mechanical sigh at 6 to Liam, sharp. The same Swiss guard stood there, expression blank as polished marble, but his eyes, they flicked to my chest for just a fraction too long, as if he could see the brand glowing faintly beneath my torn shirt. He said nothing, just handed me a fresh cassock, black, Jesuit style, and turned away. I stumbled out into the pale Roman light, the key thrumming in approval with every step, like it was eager to return. Night 2 began the same way. The doors sealed, the sigh, the cold deepening to something predatory. But tonight felt different, heavier. The air carried a new scent, wet paper and decay, like a library left to drown. My chest ached where the scar had crusted over, the cherub mouth now etched permanently into my skin, lips curved in that eternal, knowing smile. I set the recorder down on the desk, closer this time, almost pressing it to the brand as if the device could translate the key's whispers into something sane. I needed answers. The visions from last night gnawed at me. The 1963 rite, the dual enthronement, one in the Pauline Chapel here, one allegedly in some forgotten American chapel, mirroring each other across the ocean like a dark symphony. Historians dismissed Malachi Martin's claims as the ravings of a disillusioned priest, but Father Gabriele Amorth, the Vatican's chief exorcist for decades, had hinted in private letters that something irreversible happened that year. The smoke of Satan entered the church, he wrote once, quoting Paul 6:6 himself. I had come here to prove it was metaphor, hyperbole from scared old men. Now I wasn't so sure. I moved deeper into the stacks, flashlight beam cutting narrow paths through the gloom. The shelves loomed taller tonight, or perhaps I was shrinking. My bare feet. I'd kicked off my shoes sometime during the day, unable to bear anything constricting, patted softly on the frigid marble. The key guided me, subtle tugs in my chest like a compass needle pointing north. Deeper, always deeper. I found it on a shelf marked Libri Prohibiti, Sectio Occulta, a section not on any catalog I'd been given. The book was bound in what looked like pale leather, soft and supple, with no title on the spine, just a faint embossing, a face, human, screaming. My hand trembled as I pulled it free. It was heavier than it should be, warm like living flesh. The cover yielded slightly under my fingers, almost breathing. I carried it back to the reading desk under the green lamp, the key pulsing faster now, excited, like a dog straining at the leash. I opened it. The pages weren't parchment, they were thinner, translucent, and as the light hit them, I realized with a lurch that made bile rise in my throat. They were faces, human faces, flayed and cured, stretched taut over some invisible frame. Dozens of them, layered like onion skin, each one frozen in an expression of exquisite agony, eyes wide, mouths agape, cheeks etched with tears that had long since dried into salt tracks. The first face stared up at me, a woman, mid-30s, beauty marred by terror. Her skin was pale, almost luminous, with faint freckles across the nose. I knew that face. I'd seen it in old photographs, the disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi, the Vatican citizen who vanished in 1983, her case still unsolved. Whispers of involvement from high-ranking clergy never proven, but here she was, preserved, screaming silently from the page. I flipped to the next. A man this time, older, clerical collar tattooed around the neck in faded ink. His eyes, God, his eyes were scratched out, raw gouges where pupils should be. Another page, a child, no older than 10, lips sewn shut with golden thread that matched the veins under my skin. The key throbbed in ecstasy. One of the faces moved, not the book, the face itself. The woman's, Emanuela's, eyes darted side to side, then fixed on me. Her mouth stretched wider, skin cracking audibly like old leather, and a whisper escaped, dry as dust. You opened it. I slammed the codex shut, heart slamming against ribs that no longer felt entirely mine. But the damage was done. The faces were waking. A soft ripping sound filled the room, like Velcro tearing slowly. I looked down. The cover was bulging, the embossed, screaming face pushing outward, cheeks inflating as if taking a breath after decades of suffocation. The leather split along the mouth, revealing not bone or muscle beneath, but more faces, smaller ones, nested like Russian dolls, all blinking in unison. One ripped free. It was my face, not a likeness. My face, exact down to the stubble on my jaw. The faint scar above my left eyebrow from a childhood fall. It tore away from the cover with a wet suck. Trailing threads of sinew that weren't sinew but golden filaments, the same as the key's veins now threading through my body. The detached face hovered in the air, inches from mine. eyes wide with my own terror. Its mouth opened, but no sound came. Instead, it lunged. I recoiled, chair toppling, but it was faster. It slapped against my real face like a wet mask, cold and clammy, edges sealing to my skin with a burning kiss. I clawed at it, nails digging into what felt like my own cheeks, but it only laughed, a muffled, bubbling sound from behind my flesh. The pain exploded as it began to merge. I felt my skin softening, yielding, the intruding face burrowing deeper, stitching itself into place. My vision blurred, doubled, seeing through two sets of eyes at once. Memories that weren't mine flooded in. Emanuela's last walk through Rome, the van that pulled up, hands over her mouth, the journey into darkness beneath the holy sea, the child from the pages whispering prayers as golden thread pulled tight, the priest begging for absolution that never came. I screamed, the sound garbled through layers of flesh. The key surged, pumping liquid fire through my veins, accelerating the fusion. My cheeks stretched, lips pulling into that eternal scream. I could feel my old face peeling away beneath, sloughing off like dead bark, revealing the new one raw and bleeding. In desperation, I grabbed the desk lamp, hot, blessed brass, and smashed it against my head. Glass shattered, bulb exploding in a shower of sparks. The impact jarred the merging face, loose just enough. It peeled back with a sickening rip, trailing strips of my skin like melted cheese. I hurled it away. It hit the floor, writhing, my features distorting in agony, mouth forming words I couldn't hear. Flames from the broken lamp caught the trailing filaments, golden threads igniting like fuse wire. The face shrieked silently as fire consumed it, curling edges blackening, eyes melting into runny wax. The codex slammed shut on its own, faces inside howling in chorus that vibrated through the shelves. Books trembled, dust rained down. I collapsed, face a ruin of blood and burns, but mine again, barely. The key pulsed slow and satisfied, like a beast after a meal. The chant from last night returned, closer now, echoing from the depths where the forbidden sections waited, and in the flames dying on the floor. My old face mouthed one last word before crumbling to ash, deeper. If you're feeling your skin crawl right now, check your reflection, just to be sure it's still yours. Because night 2 isn't over, and the Codex is hungry for more. Chapter 3, Night 3, The Cardinal Made of Tongues. The doors sealed again with that same exhausted sigh, as if the building resented having to let me back in after I'd spent the day wandering Rome like a ghost. My face was still raw from the fire, skin blistered tight across my cheeks. But the pain had dulled to a constant throb that synced perfectly with the key's lazy heartbeat. I hadn't looked in a mirror since dawn. I was afraid of what might look back. Tonight the reading room felt smaller. The ceiling had lowered, or the shelves had grown, either way. The shadows pooled thicker, and the green banker's lamp barely pushed them back 10 feet. The air tasted different. Coppery, wet, like someone had been licking pennies in the dark. I didn't bother with the desk. The key tugged me forward, a steady pressure behind the sternum, the way a dog strains at its leash when it smells blood. I followed it between the stacks, deeper than I'd dared the previous nights, past sections labeled in languages that hurt to read. My bare feet left faint, bloody prints. The burns on my face had reopened sometime during the day and wept clear fluid that mixed with sweat. The tug sharpened into a yank. I stumbled into a narrow aisle I swear hadn't existed yesterday. The shelves here were different, black wood veined with gold, books bound in what looked suspiciously like cured human ears, and at the end of the aisle, hanging from the ceiling by a single red cord, was a cardinal's galero. The wide brimmed hat swayed gently, though there was no draft. Beneath it stood the cardinal. He had no face. Where features should have been was only a writhing mass of tongues, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, pink, purple, gray, some forked, some split, all slick with saliva and moving in slow, obscene waves. They spilled from the collar of his scarlet cassock like a living bib, lapping at the air, tasting it. The galero's tassels dripped something thick and dark that hissed when it hit the floor. He didn't walk, he glided. The hem of the cassock never touched the ground. It hovered an inch above the marble, leaving a ripple of crimson silk. With every silent inch he covered, the tongues extended farther, questing, sampling the dust motes, the fear sweat on my skin. I backed up. My spine hit a shelf. Books toppled around me, heavy, ancient things that landed open and bleeding ink. The cardinal raised one gloved hand. The glove was stitched from smaller tongues, still trying to speak. He pointed at my chest, directly at the key brand, and every tongue on his face turned toward me at once. A low, wet clicking filled the aisle, like 1,000 mouths trying to form the same word mine. Then he spoke, not with a voice, with all of them. The sound came from everywhere, behind me, above me, inside my skull, a chorus of popes, cardinals, screaming children, whispering nuns, all speaking at once in perfect Latin, Italian, Aramaic, English, languages I'd never studied, and some I'm certain don't exist anymore. Elias, they said, tasting my name like wine. You opened the first lock, now open your mouth. The tongues shot forward, not one or two, all of them. A pink-red tidal wave, surging across the 10 feet between us, faster than anything that wet should move. I threw myself sideways, crashing into the opposite shelf. Tongues slapped against the books where my head had been, leaving smoking welts on the leather. Where they touched, letters rearranged themselves into screaming faces that begged for mercy in languages that predated Babel. I ran, bare feet slapping marble, lungs burning, the key pounding in my chest like it was cheering him on. The aisle stretched, elongated, a throat swallowing me deeper. Behind me, the wet, dragging sound of the cardinal gliding, faster now, tongues whipping the air like lassos. I ducked left, right, anywhere. But the stacks had become a maze. Every turn looked the same. Black shelves, bleeding books, the smell of communion wine gone sour. The tongues were gaining. I could hear them tasting the sweat flying off my back. Feel the cold slime of them brushing the nape of my neck. One caught me. It wrapped around my left ankle, thick as a python, stronger than muscle, and yanked. I went down hard, chin cracking marble, teeth clicking together on a piece of my own tongue. Blood filled my mouth, copper bright. The tongue dragged me backward across the floor, nails scrabbling for purchase, leaving bloody streaks. I rolled onto my back just as the cardinal loomed overhead, cassock flaring like bat wings. The massive tongues parted, revealing a hollow cavity where a face should be, an endless red tunnel lined with teeth made of rosary beads. He knelt, slowly, gracefully, the way a lover kneels before the beloved, and began to feed. The first tongue forced its way between my lips, thick and muscular, tasting of incense and grave dirt. It pushed deeper, past my teeth, over my wounded tongue, down my throat. I gagged, choked, but it kept coming, slick and relentless, filling my mouth until my jaw cracked at the hinges. Another followed, and another, coiling around my own tongue, stroking it like a long lost brother. My vision blackened at the edges. I felt them tasting everything, my childhood confessions, the night I lost my faith in the seminary shower, the first time I whispered, "I don't stop," when I should have screamed, every secret, every shame, licked clean. The key went berserk. It slammed against my ribs from the inside, a golden battering ram trying to break free. Light exploded from the scar, searing the tongues that dared enter me. They recoiled, smoking, shriveling black at the tips. The cardinal staggered back, the hollow cavity of his face emitting a sound like a cathedral organ played underwater. I seized the moment, rolled, spat a mouthful of blood and slime, and grabbed the nearest book, a heavy 15th century missal bound in iron. I swung it with both hands like a baseball bat. The corner caught the cardinal square in the chest. The impact sounded wet, like hitting a sack of meat. He didn't fall. He unfolded. The cassock split down the middle, tongues pouring out in a flood, revealing that there was no body inside, only more tongues, layer after layer, an infinite regression of mouths devouring themselves. They surged toward me again, but slower now, smoking where the key's light had touched them. I backed away, missile raised like a shield, chanting the only thing I could remember from seminary, the rite of exorcism, the short form, brutal form Father Amorth used when time was short and the demon was strong. Exorcizo te immundissim spiritus. The tongues hissed, curling back like burned paper, omni incursione adversari. The cardinal's empty sleeves flailed, trying to cover the hollow where ears should be, in nomine Domini nostri Jesu Christi. The final words detonated. Light, real light, white and blinding, exploded from my chest. The key turned one full, violent rotation, and a beam shot out, spearing the cardinal through the cavity. Tongues ignited from the inside out, flames blue and cold, the color of altar candles left burning too long. The cardinal convulsed, mouths opening in perfect O's of agony, and then collapsed inward, folding like a burning paper effigy. Silence, only the soft patter of ash on marble. I dropped to my knees in the center of the blackened circle, vomiting blood and fragments of tongue that weren't mine. My throat was raw, shredded, but the key pulsed steady and warm, almost proud, in the ashes. Something glinted, a single red tassel from the galero, still wet. When I touched it, a final whisper brushed my mind, not angry, satisfied. 3 locks remain open, 11 to go. The shelves groaned, shifting back to their original positions as if nothing had happened. But the aisle was shorter now, and at its end, a new door had appeared, black wood, No handle, only a keyhole shaped exactly like the brand on my chest. If you just felt something brush the back of your tongue, swallow once, just to make sure nothing's hiding there, because night 3 is over, and whatever wore that cardinal's skin is still hungry. Chapter 4, Night 4, The Pauline Chapel Gives Birth. I never went back to the hotel after night 3. There was no point. The key wouldn't let me leave the Vatican walls. Every time I tried to walk toward the gates, the brand on my chest burned white hot, and my legs carried me in circles until I was facing St. Peter's again, like a dog jerked back by an invisible leash. So I slept in the archives, curled on the cold marble between the shelves, using a 14th century Bible as a pillow. The pages smelled of dust and old blood. I dreamed of tongues licking my eyelids. Tonight the tug was different, violent. A hook behind the navel, yanking me forward so hard I staggered. The key knew where it wanted to go, and it was done asking nicely. I followed the pain through corridors that rearranged themselves while I walked. Staircases appeared where walls had been, doors swung open before I touched them. The temperature dropped with every step, breath fogging, skin prickling into goose flesh that felt permanent. At the end of a hallway that definitely hadn't existed yesterday, I found a small wooden door painted the same scarlet as a cardinal's cassock. No handle, only a keyhole shaped exactly like the scar on my chest. I didn't hesitate, couldn't. My hand moved on its own, pressing palm flat against the wood. The brand flared. The door swung inward with a wet, sucking sound, like something pulling out of mud. Beyond was the Pauline Chapel, not a replica, the real one. The private papal chapel inside the Apostolic Palace where, on June 29th, 1963, a group of bishops allegedly performed the enthronement of the Prince of this world, while the same rite happened simultaneously in a chapel in South Carolina. Malachi Martin swore it on his deathbed. The Vatican called it fiction. The chapel was dark except for the altar. Moonlight speared through the high windows and pooled on the marble table like spilled milk. The crucifix upside down. Candles guttering with black flame. And the smell. Copper. Afterbirth. Frankincense gone rancid. The altar was moving. Not trembling. Moving. The solid block of Carrara marble breathed, slow and rhythmic, the way a woman's belly rises and falls in the final stage labor. I tried to back away. My feet wouldn't obey. The key held me rooted, pulsing in time with the altar's contractions. A crack appeared down the center of the marble, thin at first, then widening with a sound like ice breaking on a winter lake. Blood welled up through the fissure, thick, dark, almost black. It smelled like the inside of a confessional after 1,000 mortal sins. The crack became a cleft. The cleft became a wound. The wound began to dilate. Something crowned. First the tiara, the papal triregnum. 3 crowns of gold, slick with amniotic fluid, emerged inch by inch. Then the head beneath it, bald, veined, adult-sized, eyes already open and ancient. The face was beautiful in the way fallen angels are beautiful, symmetrical, cold, knowing. The shoulders followed, then the torso, naked and sexless, skin translucent skin stretched over bones that glowed faintly red. Umbilical cords trailed from its navel, dozens of them, each one a rosary of human finger bones strung on golden wire, crucifixes dangling like afterthoughts. It slid out fully onto the altar with a wet slap, larger than any newborn had a right to be, easily 6 feet long, curled fetal but fully grown, the Antichrist fetus, the thing the 1963 right had been trying to birth for 61 years, and it was hungry. Its head swiveled toward me with a crackle of fresh vertebrae, eyes the color of old papal seals locked on my chest, on the key brand that now throbbed in perfect synchrony with its own heartbeat. It smiled, a small, polite smile, the kind a child gives before biting. Then it began to crawl, not with arms and legs at first, with the rosary cords. They whipped out, bone beads clacking, and anchored into the marble like grappling hooks. The creature dragged itself forward, leaving a trail of blood and clear fluid that steamed in the cold air. Its mouth opened, not wide, just enough, revealing rows of tiny teeth shaped like communion hosts. It reached the edge of the altar and paused, head cocked, listening to the keys sing inside me. "Mama," it said, voice soft, androgynous, layered with every pope who ever sat on Peter's throne. "Feed me." The cords lashed out, one looped around my wrist, bone beads cutting to the marrow. Another snaked under my shirt and pierced the skin just below the brand, burrowing toward the key like a nursing tube. I felt it latch on, cold, sucking, drawing. Milk did not come, light did, golden, searing, the same light that had destroyed the tongues last night. It poured from the scar into the cord, into the creature, its translucent skin lit up from within, veins glowing like molten gold. For a moment it looked almost holy. Then it began to grow, fast. Flesh ballooned, bones lengthened with wet cracking sounds. In seconds it was 8 feet, 10, towering over me on the altar, cords thickening into cables. The tiara expanded with its skull, gold stretching like warm taffy. Its smile never wavered. I tried to pull away. The cord only tightened, as bone beads grinding together, threatening to saw my arm off at the elbow. The key inside me sang louder, ecstatic, as if this thing, this brother, this child, drew strength straight from the lock it had been forged to open. The creature leaned down until its face filled my vision. Its breath smelled of chrism oil and rotting lilies. "You kept me waiting 61 years, it whispered, lips brushing my ear, tongues tiny, new ones, flicked out to taste the burns on my cheek. "But the throne is ready now, and you are going to carry me to it." It placed one enormous hand over my sternum. Fingers sank in, not breaking skin, phasing through, until I felt them close around the key like a mother cradling a child's heart. I screamed. The sound came out wrong, layered, choral, as if the chapel itself was screaming with me. The creature laughed, a sound like cathedral bells tolling underwater, and began to pull, not the key, me, into it. My chest stretched, skin splitting along the scar, ribs creaking open like double doors. I felt myself inverting, folding inward, becoming the womb instead of the father. The creature's face pressed closer, mouth opening wider, wider, until it was a perfect circle of teeth and darkness. And in that darkness, I saw the throne, white marble, blood-stained, waiting beneath the balcony of St. Peter's, with my body as its cradle. The key turned one final, loving click, just as the creature's mouth closed around my head. Something detonated inside my chest, not light this time, but sound, a single word, screamed in a voice that was not mine, but used my throat all the same. Non serviam. I will not serve. The creature recoiled as if burned. The cords snapped, whipping back, bone beads exploding into powder. It shrieked, a sound that shattered every window in the chapel, stained glass raining down in jeweled shards, and curled fetal again, shrinking, skin bubbling, tiara melting into its skull. I fell backward through the scarlet door. It slammed shut behind me, sealing with a wet, fleshy sound, silence. Then laughter, not the creature's, mine, but wrong, deeper, older. When I looked down, the brand had changed. The cherub mouth was gone. In its place, a tiny handprint. 5 perfect fingers, newborn sized, pressing outward from inside my skin, pushing, and beneath it, something kicked. If you just felt a flutter under your own ribs, don't press on it. Whatever's growing in there doesn't like being touched before it's ready. Night 4 is over, but something inside me just quickened. Chapter 5, Night 5, The Children Who Wear Their Skin Inside Out. I never left the Pauline Chapel after the birth. The scarlet door had vanished, leaving only smooth wall and the faint smell of afterbirth that no amount of incense could mask. I sat on the floor for hours, maybe the whole day, palms pressed to the handprint blooming beneath my sternum. It was warm now, pulsing, occasionally shifting, as if whatever had quickened inside me was turning over in its sleep. When the doors finally unsealed at dusk, the Swiss guard wasn't there, only a single child's shoe, small, white, patent leather, placed neatly in the threshold. The buckle was shaped like a tiny papal tiara. I knew where I had to go. The key, no. The thing wearing the key pulled me downward, spiral staircase after spiral staircase, deeper than the archives were supposed to go. The air grew wetter, warmer, thick with the smell of earth after rain and something sweeter underneath. Talcum powder must mixed with old blood. My bare feet stuck to the steps, sticky, like walking on tongues. At the bottom was a door I had never seen on any map. Iron, rusted, bound with chains made of rosary beads, fused end to end. The crucifix at the center had been melted into a screaming face. The chains slithered aside on their own, links clinking like baby teeth. Beyond was the ninth circle, not Dante's frozen lake. Something worse. A vast circular chamber, walls glistening wet red, veined like the inside of a throat. The floor was soft, spongy, giving slightly underfoot with a wet sigh. In the center, 50 children stood in perfect formation. They wore their skin inside out, flayed whole, like gloves turned backward, the raw side facing out, dripping clear serum that hissed where it touched the floor. Eye sockets were empty red pits, mouths lipless slits stretched into permanent grins. Their cloaks of reversed skin flapped gently, as if stirred by breath from within. They were singing, not with voices, with the sound skin makes when it stretches, a low, wet humming, rising and falling like a nursery rhyme played underwater. Ring-a-ring, o roses, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall, down. The circle parted. In the middle stood a single child, no cloak, just raw muscle and tendon gleaming under the bioluminescent veins in the walls. Its face was almost formed, cheekbones high, eyes still closed. It raised one tiny, fingerless hand and beckoned. The conga line began. The first child, The tallest, skin cloak dragging behind like a bridal train, grabbed my wrist with fingers that ended in exposed bone. Its touch was ice and fire at once. The reversed skin on its palm rasped against mine. Sticky, sucking. They pulled me in. The line closed. 50 children, one adult. We began to move. Left foot, right foot. Step touch, step touch. Every step peeled. The first layer came off like wet silk, my epidermis lifting in one continuous sheet from ankles to neck, rolling upward as gently as gift wrap. The pain was exquisite, 1,000 paper cuts blooming into fire. I felt the air kiss raw dermis, cold and wet and loving. Blood beaded instantly, thick and warm, running down in rivulets that the floor drank with soft slurping sounds. The children sang louder, their flayed cloaks flapping in rhythm. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Another circuit, another layer. The dermis went next, thicker, tougher, ripping away in long pink strips that curled like apple peel. Nerves screamed awake, every inch of me suddenly, violently alive. The smell hit then, copper and barbecue and baby powder, all mixed, my own cooking meat. I tried to scream. One of the children, small, blonde curls still attached to the inside-out scalp, turned its empty eye sockets toward me and pressed a raw finger to where its lips used to be. Shh. Third circuit. Fat and connective tissue sloughed off in greasy sheets, slapping wetly to the floor where the spongy surface absorbed them with greedy gulping noises. Muscles gleamed beneath, raw and red and twitching. Veins stood out like purple ropes, pulsing in time with the song. I was walking muscle now. No skin, no fat, just meat and bone and the thing in my chest that laughed with every step. The child in the center, the almost formed one, opened its eyes. They were mine, blue, bloodshot, terrified. It smiled with my mouth. The conga line stopped. 50 flayed children turned as one, their inside-out faces tilted, studying me the way butchers study a fresh carcass. Then they began to clap, slow, wet, rhythmic, clap, clap, clap. With every clap, a strip of muscle tore free from my body, calf, thigh, bicep, whipping through the air to join their cloaks. The pain was beyond sound. My vision tunneled to red. I fell to my knees, or what was left of them. The central child walked forward. Its feet made no sound on the thirsty floor. It knelt, placed one raw hand on my exposed sternum, right over the tiny handprint that now pushed outward in clear relief. Inside me, something kicked, hard. The child leaned in until our foreheads touched, raw muscle to raw muscle, slick and hot. "Thank you, Daddy," it whispered with my own voice. Almost time to come out and play. Then it kissed me, not on the mouth, on the handprint, its lips sealed over the bulge, sucking gently, rhythmically, like nursing. I felt the pull, deep, tidal, something vast and crowned shifting position inside my ribcage, turning toward the light. The children began to sing again, softer now, a lullaby in reversed Latin and somewhere in the walls. 50 tiny heartbeats answered mine. If you just felt a flutter beneath your own skin, a tugging, a turning, don't lie down. Whatever is wearing you is almost ready to dance. Night 5 is over, but the conga line never really ends. Chapter 6, Night 6, Chronovisor Suicide Loop. The spiral staircase reappeared at 3:33 a.m. exactly, yawning open in the floor of the ninth circle like a mouth that had decided to swallow me whole. The children were gone. Only their inside-out skins remained, draped over the walls like obscene wallpaper, still twitching faintly whenever the thing inside my chest kicked. I descended because I had no choice. The handprint on my sternum had become a fist, pushing, demanding. Each step downward felt like stepping into warmer, amniotic fluid. The air grew thick, syrupy, tasting of ozone and old film reels. At the bottom was a vault I recognized from forbidden photographs, a lead-lined chamber Father Pellegrino Ernetti allegedly used in the 1950s to house the chronovisor, the Vatican's supposed time viewing machine, a brass and crystal monstrosity built with stolen Tesla schematics and the dying breath of 12 Benedictine monks. The device waited in the center, humming softly, vacuum tubes glowing the color of fresh bruises. Its screen, a convex sheet of polished quartz the size of a coffin lid, rippled like disturbed water. The key turned inside me without permission. One full rotation. The fist in my chest unclenched into fingers that spread, pressing outward in a star. The chronovisor woke. Static snow resolved into an image, me, standing right where I was now, but older, gaunt, eyes milk white. The papal tiara fused to my skull like it had grown there. Future me smiled, then slit his own throat with a consecrated host sharpened to a razor. Blood sprayed the lens. The image looped again, faster. Another version appeared beside the first, me hanging from the vault ceiling by rosary cords knotted around my neck, feet kicking inches above the floor, face purple, tongue protruding like a mocking communion wafer. Loop, me setting myself alight with blessed candles, skin bubbling as I danced screaming. Loop, me swallowing a chalice full of molten gold. The key liquefied and poured down my own throat. Loop after loop after loop. 666 versions in perfect synchrony. Each one a different suicide. Each one more inventive, more excruciating than the last. The screen began to bleed light, sickly white, spilling out across the floor like liquid mercury. Then the screen cracked, not shattered, cracked open like an egg. Hands emerged. My hands, 666 pairs, reaching through the quartz, fingers raw and bleeding from self-inflicted wounds, nails torn from clawing at throats, eyes, arteries. Some hands still clutch the instruments of their own deaths, shards of mirror, crucifixes twisted into garrots, rosaries dripping wet. They grabbed the edges of the crack and pulled. The screen tore wide with a sound like wet canvas ripping, and they stepped out, all of them, simultaneously. 666 versions of Elias Crow, each one wearing the exact moment of death like a costume, throats gaping, eyes burned out, skin charred or flayed or bloated purple from hanging. They smelled of every way a human body can rot, sweet and sour and metallic and burnt. They spoke with my voice, layered 666 deep, a chorus that vibrated the lead walls. You let it in. You fed it. You're going to wear it on the throne. Time to finish what you started. They advanced. I ran. The vault was small, 10 meters across, but distance meant nothing. Every direction I turned. Another version was already there, blocking, smiling the same broken smile. One grabbed my arm with fingers still dripping from arterial spray. Another wrapped a noose of its own intestines around my neck and pulled tight. I fought. I had to kill them before they killed me. The first one I smashed across the face with the chronovisor's brass control panel, bone caved like wet cardboard. It laughed through a ruined mouth and kept coming. I drove my thumbs into the eyes of a burned version, felt them pop like overripe grapes, hot fluid running down my wrists. It whispered, "Thank you," and tried to hug me while flames reignited across its skin. I strangled a hanging version with its own rosary, beads cutting into my palms until they bled gold. Its tongue lolled black and swollen, but it still managed to lick my cheek with the taste of final confession. One by one, I killed them, my future corpses, tearing, smashing, biting when I had to. The vault became a slaughterhouse of myself. Blood painted every surface in overlapping handprints. The air filled with the wet sounds of meat hitting meat and the endless chorus of my own dying screams. I was down to the last 12 when the final version stepped forward. It was me, but perfect, unmarked skin, eyes clear, the papal tiara already resting lightly on his brow, as if it belonged there. The thing inside my chest kicked so hard I staggered. This version smiled gently. "You can't kill what you become," he said in my normal voice, the one I hadn't heard in days. "Stop fighting. Let it out. The throne is cold. It needs warmth." He reached for my chest, fingers spreading over the handprint that now pushed outward in perfect relief. 5 tiny fingers and a palm, ready to grasp the world. I raised the broken control rod, jagged brass, dripping with versions of my own blood, and drove it straight through his heart. He looked down, surprised, then up at me, smiling wider. "Thank you," he whispered. "One last lock." The rod melted, turned liquid, flowed into the wound like it was coming home. Every corpse I had killed stood up again, wounds closing, flesh knitting, eyes clearing. 666 perfect versions of the crowned Elias surrounded me, hands reaching. The chronovisor screen behind them flickered once more. It showed tomorrow, me, whole, beautiful, terrible, standing on the balcony of St. Peter's in pure white, arms spread, while Rome burned below and the sky bled black. The final version leaned in until our foreheads touched. "Almost time, love," he whispered. "Almost time to be born." Inside my chest, the hand gripped and began to pull itself out. If you just felt fingers close around your own heart, don't fight. Resistance only makes the birth slower and more painful. Night 6 is over, but tomorrow is already crowning. On Chapter 7, Night 7, the incorrupt saints melt and merge. I never made it out of the chronovisor vault. After the 666 crowned versions folded back into the screen like smoke sucked into a lung, the machine itself went dark, tubes cooling with a sound like dying sighs. I collapsed against the lead wall, raw muscle exposed and trembling, the hand inside my chest gripping and releasing in slow, experimental squeezes, as if learning how a heart should beat. Then the temperature inverted. One moment the air was cold enough to burn, the next it was tropically wet, thick with the stench of lilies left in holy water too long. The hand in my chest stilled, suddenly attentive, like a child hearing its mother's footsteps. A new door appeared opposite the staircase, oak bound in silver, carved with the names of saints whose bodies supposedly never decayed: Catherine of Siena, Bernadette Soubirous, John of the Cross, Pio of Pietrelcina, dozens more. The names glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the thing inside me. The door opened by itself. Beyond was a long, narrow crypt lit only by the bodies. They lay in glass reliquaries along both walls, 24 in all, dressed in their original habits or Franciscan robes, faces serene, hands folded in eternal prayer, incorruptibles. The Church's proof that holiness could defeat entropy itself, except they were no longer incorrupt. The skin of the nearest saint, Saint Clare of Assisi, began to glisten, then to sweat a clear, oily fluid that smelled of myrrh and formaldehyde. The droplets ran together, merging, racing down the glass in rivulets. Her companions followed in perfect synchrony, cheeks sagging, fingers softening, habits darkening as the liquid soaked through centuries-old cloth. A sound like ice cracking in spring filled the crypt. The bodies liquefied, not rotted, liquefied. Flesh turning to translucent golden slime, while bones remained suspended inside like relics in amber. The slime poured from ears, nostrils, gently smiling mouths, pooling on the floor of each reliquary until the glass could no longer contain it. One by one, the cases shattered outward in silent explosions of crystal. The golden slime flowed together across the stone, merging, rising, forming a single sentient mass the color of consecrated oil. It rose to the height of a man, then higher, shaping itself into a towering column with 24 faces floating on its surface, saints' faces, serene and loving and utterly hungry. It spoke with all their voices at once, soft, maternal, irresistible. Come, child, let us baptize you properly this time. The column surged. I tried to run, but the floor had turned viscous. Every step dragged like wading through honey. The slime overtook me, warm and gentle, wrapping around ankles, calves, thighs. It smelled of every funeral I'd ever attended, every chrismation, every Easter vigil candle. It reached my waist and began to climb. I clawed at it, but my raw muscle hands sank in up to the wrists. The slime welcomed them, caressing exposed nerves with a lover's tenderness. Pain became pleasure, became pain again. An endless loop. The saints' faces pressed close, lips brushing my ears, my cheeks, the raw meat of my neck. Drink of us, Elias, be filled with the Spirit. The column reared up, forming a hollow in its center like a mouth. It lifted me off the floor, cradling me in liquid arms, and forced itself between my lips. I gagged, fought, bit down. But the slime had no solidity. It simply poured faster, thick and sweet and burning. Gallons of it, far more than the bodies could have contained, flooded my throat, my stomach, my lungs. I felt it spreading through every artery, every vein, every raw capillary, seeking the thing gestating behind my ribs. The hand inside me clenched in terror. The saints crooned in ecstasy. It was baptizing me from the inside out, trying to drown the unborn king in holy water turned weapon. My belly distended, skin stretching translucent, veins glowing gold. Pressure built until something had to give. I vomited, not bile, maggots, thousands of them, fat and luminous, pouring from my mouth in a glowing torrent that lit the crypt like a river of stars. They hit the floor writhing, arranging themselves with obscene intelligence into perfect Latin letters 3 feet high. Legio, we are many. The saint's slime recoiled, hissing, faces twisting in rage. The maggots surged upward, a living wave, burrowing into the golden column, devouring it from within. The saints screamed, 24 voices braided into one unholy chord. As their essence was consumed, the column collapsed, splashing across the floor in steaming pools that the maggots drank until nothing remained but empty habits and a ring of 24 jawbones grinning in the dark. I fell among them, raw muscle steaming, lungs full of glowing larvae that crawled deeper instead of dying. Inside my chest, the hand relaxed, curled fingers into a fist, and punched once, hard, against my sternum from the inside. Crack! A rib gave way. The maggots inside me began to sing with my voice, soft and childish and overjoyed. Soon, if you just felt something crawl across the back of your tongue, swallow, they like it warm. Night 7 is over, but the Legion has found its host. Chapter 8, Night 8, The Library Becomes Teeth. I woke on the floor of the incorrupt saint's crypt with the taste of maggots still coating my tongue and the sound of grinding in my ears. Not distant, close, inside the walls. The grinding grew louder, wetter, accompanied by a low, rhythmic crunching that vibrated through the stone and into my raw muscle. I pushed myself up on trembling arms, every nerve ending screaming from the skinless night before, and saw the first tooth push through the wall, one molar, human, yellowed with age, root still dripping blood and pulp, then another and another. They erupted in rows, bursting from the plaster like kernels of corn under demonic heat. Canines or incisors, wisdom teeth, all sizes, all eras, some still wearing gold fillings that glinted under the failing emergency lights. The walls groaned as more forced their way out, cracking stone, splintering centuries-old frescoes. The teeth gnawed forward, chewing the building itself from the inside. The floor followed. Marble tiles buckled upward as molars erupted beneath my palms, grinding against each other with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a glacier made of bone. I scrambled backward, raw flesh dragging across the newborn teeth, leaving bloody smears. The pain was immediate and intimate, like crawling over broken glass that wanted to taste me. The entire crypt shuddered, a deep, sub-audible rumble that I felt in my exposed bones. Then the shelves began to scream, not metaphorically. The oak bookcases lining the far wall split open lengthwise, wood fibers peeling back like lips. From the raw wounds poured rivers of teeth, thousands, millions, cascading down in clicking avalanches that piled knee-deep and kept rising. The air filled with the stench of old fillings, plaque, and the copper tang of fresh gums. The archives were eating themselves alive. I ran, bare muscle feet slapping on a carpet of molars that crunched and shifted under me, trying to trip, to bite. The corridors had narrowed overnight, walls pressing inward, lined now with endless rows of human dentition. Upper and lower jaws met in the middle of hallways, forming archways of grinding teeth that snapped shut behind me as I passed, barely missing my heels. The chewing became a heartbeat, the entire 85 kilometers of shelves contracting and expanding in peristaltic waves, digesting the knowledge they had guarded for centuries. Books tumbled from the gnawing maws, pages shredded midair by incisors the size of tombstones. I burst into the main reading room, The ceiling had descended. Where frescoed cherubs once smiled, now hung a pallet of soft pink flesh studded with molars the size of cathedral doors. Drool, clear, viscous, smelling of holy water and decay, dripped in thick ropes that hissed where it touched the floor. The floor rose to meet it. A wave of teeth rolled toward me, a living carpet, molars clacking in excitement. I dove sideways as it surged past, snapping shut like a bear trap inches from my torso. There was no out. The library had become a single, colossal mouth, and it was hungry for what I carried. The wave reversed, surging back, faster. I turned to run and felt the floor soften beneath me, turning spongy, then liquid. No, not liquid. Gum. Pink. Warm, sticky gum lined with teeth that began to chew upward. It caught me waist first. The molars closed around my hips with a wet crunch that pulverized bone and muscle alike. Pain exploded white hot, blotting out everything. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the grinding. The lower half of my body went numb instantly, severed nerves firing in useless chaos. The library began to swallow. I was dragged backward, teeth gnawing higher, reaching for the thing gestating in my chest. The hand inside me kicked frantically, terrified for the first time. On a nearby table lay the only weapon I had seen in days, a consecrated bone saw from the 1918 influenza pandemic, used by a Vatican surgeon priest to amputate gangrenous limbs while praying over the dying. Its blade was still stained with old blood and blessed oil. I seized it. The teeth reached my rib cage. I brought the saw down on my own spine, just above the chewing line, once, twice. Bone parted with a wet crack that echoed through the entire digestive tract of the library. The third stroke severed me completely. I fell forward, upper body collapsing onto the relative safety of a table, lower half vanishing into the grinding maw with a final, obscene gulp. Blood jetted from the stump in rhythmic pulses, painting the teeth red. Behind me, the chewing paused, then resumed, satisfied. I dragged myself across the table with my arms, raw muscle leaving bloody handprints, the bone saw still clutched in one fist. My vision swam, but I could hear it, my own legs standing up inside the library's throat, knees bending, feet finding purchase on the soft pallet of molars. They began to walk, not away, toward me, carrying whatever had been left behind in the lower half, something that now wore my legs like pants. The footsteps were wet, crunching, deliberate, coming to collect the rest. If you just felt a phantom itch below the waist, a twitch in legs that aren't moving, don't look down. It's already learning how you walk. Night 8 is over, but the library is still digesting, and it wants seconds. Chapter 9, Night 9, The Black Mass Crucifixion. Roulette gravity forgot its purpose and let me fall upward through a darkness that tasted of melted candle wax and menstrual blood. I landed hard on cold marble, the impact jarring what little bone I still possessed. When my vision cleared, I found myself in the Sistine Chapel turned inside out. The ceiling had become the floor. Michelangelo's God now stretched one accusing finger downward from what had once been sky, while the Last Judgment had been freshly repainted in shades of bruise and gold. Every saved soul screamed. Every damned soul wore the scarlet of a cardinal. 100 cardinals waited in perfect concentric rings around a single inverted cross suspended by chains fashioned from human spines. Their beauty was unbearable, skin flawless, eyes molten, miters fused to their skulls like crowns of living bone. They turned toward me in one fluid motion, and the air filled with a single, hundred-throated whisper that curled inside my ears like smoke. Elias, the ninth hour has come, time to spin the wheel. My severed lower half rose behind me, legs already knitting new flesh, the crowned gestation dragging beneath it like a tumor with royal ambitions. It walked me forward until my back pressed against the black wood of the cross. The surface was warm, pulsing faintly, as though the tree from which it had been hewn still remembered Golgotha. A cardinal approached, a woman whose eyes burned the color of consecrated wine held too long to the light. In her hands she carried a hammer forged from a melted papal tiara. She kissed my forehead with lips that tasted of incense and iron, then drove the first nail through my right wrist. The pain was immediate, absolute, and strangely clean, like a bell struck inside my bones. Blood ran upward along the nail, feeding the cross. A second cardinal stepped forward and nailed my left wrist. A third and fourth took my ankles. With each hammer blow, the choir grew richer, until 100 demonic voices braided themselves into a single inverted hymn that made the frescoed prophets weep black tears. When the fifth nail pinned the stump of my remaining thigh, the cross began to turn, slowly at first, a lazy rotation that let me feel every degree, then faster, 10 revolutions per limb, each revolution tearing something away and replacing it with holiness that could not bear to remain holy in my presence. My right arm ripped free at the shoulder with a wet pop of tendon and cartilage before the blood could fall. A cardinal caught the limb and pressed the mummified arm of St. Francis against the wound. Skin met raw muscle and fused instantly. I felt the stigmata gloves tighten around fingers that were no longer mine. For one heartbeat, the relic glowed with borrowed grace. Then the flesh blackened, liquefied, and slid from the bone in stinking sheets. Maggots poured from the holes where nails had once pierced divine palms, arranging themselves midair into the word vanitas before dropping away. Another rotation, my left arm torn, St. Catherine of Sienna's hand grafted on, fingers already moving in the ecstasy of her visions. It rotted faster, crumbling to dust that spelled peccator across my chest. The wheel accelerated, right leg below the knee, replaced by St. John the Baptist's shin bone still bearing the marks of desert sandals. Left leg, St. Peter's foot with the inverted keys tattooed on the sole, each relic fused, prayed, decayed, and fell away in a liturgy of corruption. St. Teresa's heart hand, St. Sebastian's arrow-riddled thigh, St. Lucy's eyes on a platter grafted where my shoulder had been, weeping black tears that wrote Vidi before melting into pus. I became a carousel of rotting sanctity, each saint screaming as its flesh rejected me, each scream adding another voice to the cardinal choir until the chapel itself seemed to sing. 100 rotations, 100 relics, 100 names of God spoken backward. On the final revolution, the wheel stopped so abruptly my neck snapped sideways. Silence fell like a guillotine. The cardinals knelt. From the very center of the innermost circle stepped the last priest. In his arms, he carried the tiniest relic of all, the right hand of the Santo Bambino of Aracoeli, stolen centuries ago and never returned. The hand was perfect, newborn, fingers still curled as if reaching for a mother's breast. He pressed it gently, reverently, against the swollen bulge in my lower torso. It did not rot. It fused, skin to skin, bone to bone, relic to gestation. The tiny fingers flexed once, then curled possessively around the crowned thing inside me. My sternum cracked open like theater curtains, parting for the final act. The crowned child looked out with my eyes, smiled with my mouth, and spoke with every pope who had ever lived, layered over the innocent soprano of a child about to be born. Thank you for the cradle, Daddy. The throne is ready. The cardinals rose as one and began to process toward the ceiling that was now the floor, toward the balcony of St. Peter's, waiting above like an open mouth. The cross resumed its spin, this time upward, carrying me, carrying us toward coronation. If somewhere inside your own chest a small hand has just closed into a fist, do not be afraid. It is only learning how to wave. Night 9 is over. The coronation has already begun. Chapter 10, Night 10, The Obelisk Impalement. The coronation procession never reached the balcony, halfway up the inverted Sistine shaft. The chapel itself convulsed. A sound, like every bell in Rome, cracking at once tore through the air, followed by a tremor that felt as if the Vatican had been struck by something older than earthquakes. The cardinals froze mid-step, their perfect faces fracturing into expressions of animal terror. The crowned child inside me recoiled, pressing both tiny hands against the inside of my sternum as though trying to hold the walls closed. Then the sky fell, not metaphorically. The ceiling above us, the real floor of St. Peter's Square, ripped open with a roar of stone and screaming tourists. Sunlight poured down like molten gold, blinding, merciless. Through the widening fissure, I saw the Egyptian obelisk. The ancient monolith Caligula stole from Heliopolis, and Constantine planted in the heart of Christendom. Tear-free of its foundation, it did not topple, it inverted. Slowly, majestically, the 327-ton needle of red granite flipped end over end, base rising, tip pointing straight down into the wound it had just carved through the Vatican. Hieroglyphs flared to life along its length, glowing blood red, spelling curses in a language that predated Moses and made the demons in the cardinals whimper. The obelisk fell, not dropped, dove, like a spear thrown by a god who had grown bored with mercy. It punched through every level of the archives in a single heartbeat, through the Sistine ceiling, through the papal apartments, through the secret libraries, through the incorrupt saints, through the children's skins, through the teeth, through the chronovisor vault, through the ninth circle, through every horror I had survived, until the sharpened tip erupted into the inverted chapel exactly where I hung. I had 1 instant to register the shadow. Then it took me. The tip entered my mouth, not violently at first, almost gently, like a lover's finger tracing lips, then pressure, immense, irresistible, teeth shattered, jaw dislocated with a wet pop, the granite shaft, still spinning slowly from its inversion, drove downward through palate, throat, esophagus, stomach, intestines, spine, in one continuous, lubricated thrust. I felt every inch. The obelisk was warm, alive, humming with the same frequency as the thing inside me. Hieroglyphs crawled across its surface like ants, burrowing into my raw muscle wherever they touched, branding curses directly onto nerve endings. My body convulsed around the intrusion, impaled from mouth to anus, suspended 30 feet above the chapel floor like a kebab on a skewer of ancient hatred. The cardinals screamed and scattered, scarlet robes igniting as the sunlight touched them. The crowned child inside me went very still, as though listening to a lullaby only it could hear. The obelisk stopped, embedded to its full length through every level of the Vatican, tip protruding from the crater in St. Peter's Square above. Base buried somewhere beneath the ninth circle, I hung in the middle, crucified vertically on pagan stone inside the heart of Catholicism. Then the curses began to speak, not aloud, inside my skull, in the voice of every pharaoh who ever ordered a pyramid built on the backs of slaves. They recited my life backward, every doubt, every moment I chose ambition over compassion. Every time I whispered, I don't believe in the dark, each memory was carved into the granite and then into me, deeper than flesh, until I felt my soul itself being flayed by hieroglyphs. The worst part was the intimacy. The obelisk was not content merely to impale. It wanted conversation. It showed me what it had seen, Caligula laughing as it was loaded onto a ship in Egypt, Constantine dedicating it to the sun god while secretly planning to baptize Rome in blood, every pope who ever stood beneath it and lied about peace while plotting wars, and now me, Elias Crow, the final irony, a man who came to expose corruption, chosen instead as the capstone of the greatest blasphemy the Vatican never admitted. The child inside me stirred, pressing its crowned head against the shaft where it pierced my diaphragm. It was listening, too, learning. The obelisk vibrated, a low, sexual thrum that traveled the length of my body and out into the stone. The curses shifted tone, no longer accusatory, seductive. Stay, they whispered. Become the axis. Let the child be born on the needle that pierced the veil between gods. I felt my will dissolving, sweet as honey, warm as sunlight. The pain receded into a dull, pleasant ache. It would be so easy to let go, to become the living bridge between heaven and hell. The final lock turned by my own surrender. But something else answered, the legion of maggots from night 7, still nested in my lungs, began to writhe. They remembered holy slime. They remembered being vomited out as legio, and they did not like Egyptian gods. They surged. Thousands of glowing larvae poured from my nostrils, my ears, the corners of my ruined mouth, crawling up the obelisk in a living river where they touched the hieroglyphs. The curses screamed and went dark. The vibration faltered. I seized the moment, with arms that ended in rotting relics and a torso that was more womb than man. I began to climb, hand over hand up the shaft, raw muscles splitting against granite, blood greasing the way. Every inch was agony. Every inch was defiance. The obelisk fought back. It twisted inside me, trying to shake me loose. Curses flared anew, showing me visions of the child born on the balcony, Rome kneeling, the world remade in our image, so temptation, in high definition. I kept climbing, halfway up. The child inside me reached out, tiny fingers closing around the stone from within, trying to help the obelisk pull me back down. For one terrible second, I felt its love, pure, absolute, monstrous. I looked up through the crater in St. Peter's Square. Real sky waited, real air, real witnesses screaming and filming on their phones. I looked down. The crowned face stared up at me through layers of my own flesh, eyes ancient and pleading. I made my choice. I kept climbing. If somewhere in your throat you just felt stone shift, if your spine suddenly aches with an old weight, do not cough. It's only learning the shape of your backbone for when it needs to stand upright. Night 10 is over, but the needle is still rising. Chapter 11, Night 11, Lucifer's Wedding Night. I reached the crater's edge at dawn, real dawn, the first honest light in 11 nights. It spilled across St. Peter's Square in pale gold, illuminating thousands of phones held high, live streaming the impossible, an upside-down obelisk protruding from the ground like a black needle through the Vatican's heart, and me, raw muscle, crowned child bulging beneath translucent skin, crawling out of the wound on blood-slick hands. The crowd screamed. Some dropped to their knees. A few kept filming. Then the light dimmed. Not clouds. Him. He stepped out of the obelisk's shadow, wearing bridal white, papal robes, immaculate, flowing like liquid moonlight. The train was endless, stitched from the wedding dresses of every bride who ever took vows in St. Peter's and never left. The tiara was simple, 3 crowns of frozen starlight. The face beneath it was androgynous perfection, high cheekbones, full lips, eyes the color of absolution before it curdles into damnation. Lucifer, in persona Christi, but infinitely more beautiful. He smiled at me the way a groom smiles at a bride who has finally stopped running. The crowd fell silent, phones lowered, every knee bent without command. He walked across the square as if the cobblestones were rose petals. Swiss guards parted, cardinals wept openly. The air filled with the scent of orange blossoms rotting in holy water. He stopped an arm's length away and extended one gloved hand. The glove was stitched from the skin of fallen angels, soft, warm, faintly luminous. "Beloved," he said, voice layered with every pope, every lover, every lullaby ever sung to a dying child. The banns have been read for 2,000 years. Come, the bed is prepared. My body obeyed before my mind could scream. I rose, half man, half womb, and walked into his embrace. The bridal train wrapped around us both, cocooning us in white that drank the dawn. He kissed me, not on the mouth, on the ruined place where my sternum had cracked open. His tongue traced the edge of the wound, tasting the child inside. It kicked in ecstasy. Then he turned me, gently, reverently, the way a priest turns the host before elevation. The papal ferula appeared in his hand, the triple cross, one symbol of pastoral care, now a scalpel of living gold. He pressed the tip between my shoulder blades. "Breathe, spouse," he whispered against my ear. "This will hurt exactly as much as you need." The blade began to carve, not cutting skin. He had none left to cut, but bone, vertebra by vertebra, down the length of my spine, engraving his name in the only alphabet that matters, Lucifer. Each letter took an eternity, and no time at all. The ferula burned cold, then hot, then cold again, cycling through every temperature hell has ever invented. I felt every stroke, the L between my shoulders, splitting the scapulae like wings trying to unfurl, the U curving down the thoracic vertebrae, opening the cage wider for the child, the C coiling around the lumbar, a lover's arm pulling me closer. I for iliac crest, F for the fused sacrum, E and R branding the coccyx in a final, loving flourish with each letter. Memory flooded in. The first time I doubted God at age 7. The first time I chose ambition over mercy. The first time I whispered, I want more in the dark. He tasted them all through the blade, humming in pleasure, tension built, unbearable, unsexual, sacred, my body. What remained of it? Arched into the pain, blood ran upward against gravity, tracing the fresh letters in molten gold that hardened into raised scars. When the final R was complete, he pressed his palm to the finished name and pushed. Ecstasy detonated. I came blood from every wound, every pore, every orifice, thick. Arterial crimson mixed with the clear fluid of imminent birth. It fountained upward in perfect arcs, raining over the kneeling crowd who opened their mouths to receive it like manna. The child inside me screamed in orgasmic triumph. My own voice shattered when I tried to speak. Only backwards Latin emerged, perfect, fluent, ancient as the curse itself. Suirecas til ed etatsnops et aut reficul, I heard myself say, and understood perfectly. Lucifer to the spouse, the state, and the castle. He caught me as I fell, bridal style, the train wrapping us both in a cocoon of white that now dripped red. Above us, the obelisk began to hum the wedding march in frequencies that cracked stained glass across Rome. He carried me toward the basilica doors, which stood open like a mouth ready to swallow the bride. Over his shoulder, I saw the crowd rise as one, eyes glowing the same molten gold, mouths moving in perfect backwards Latin. The marriage was consummated. The honeymoon had only just begun. If somewhere inside your spine you just felt fingers trace a letter you can't yet read, relax. He always signs his work. Night 11 is over. The vows are eternal. Chapter 12, Night 12, The Heart-Eating Choir. The doors of St. Peter's opened by themselves. But they did not open onto the basilica, I knew. They opened onto a nave that stretched backward through time. Rows of confessionals lined the walls like ribs. The high altar had become a butcher's block of white marble veined with dried blood. Above it, the baldacchino twisted into a cage of bronze serpents, their mouths open in silent screams. And beneath the dome, where Michelangelo's God once reached out to Adam, there was only a black void shaped like a heart. From that void they came, 266 popes, every man who had ever worn the fisherman's ring, marching in perfect silence because none of them had heads. Their necks ended in smooth, cauterized stumps that wept slow tears of myrrh and pus. White cassocks hung open, revealing chests long since hollowed out, in place of hearts. Each pope carried a blackened, fist-sized lump suspended by golden threads, still beating, still dripping tar-like blood. They formed a semicircle around me and began to sing, no mouths. Yet the sound filled the basilica, a boys' choir twisted into something ancient and heartbroken. The melody was the Das Irae played backward on an organ made of human bones. I tried to back away, But the crowned child inside me pushed forward, tiny hands pressing against my ruined sternum from within, eager, starving. The first pope, Benedict XVI, his cassock still bearing the faint scent of Bavarian incense, reached me. His headless body knelt with the gentleness of a grandfather, gloved hands, trembling with reverence, slid between my broken ribs and closed around what remained of my heart. It was still beating. He lifted it out slowly, carefully, the way a priest lifts the host at consecration. The arteries stretched, snapped, resealed with golden thread. Blood poured, but not a drop hit the floor. It hovered in perfect spheres that spelled my name in the air before evaporating. He brought my heart to where his head should have been and pressed it against the cauterized stump. The choir's song rose to a note of pure grief. Then they began to eat. One by one, the headless popes took turns tearing pieces from my living heart, with fingers that remembered how to give blessings. Each bite was delicate, almost loving. John Paul II's hands, still wearing the ring that kissed a billion foreheads, tore a strip and placed it on his tongue that wasn't there. Francis, gentle even in damnation, wept tears of black oil as he chewed. I felt every mouthful, not pain, grief, grief for every confession I never made, grief for the boy who once believed, grief for the man who sold his soul for footnotes and tenure. My heart shrank with each bite, yet kept beating, kept feeding them, kept loving them even as they devoured me. The crowned child inside me kicked in terror, sensing its cradle emptying. 7 minutes. I understood then, with the clarity of a dying man, to survive. I had to eat theirs first, all 266 blackened hearts before mine was gone. I lunged, my hands, raw muscle and relic bone, plunged into the nearest open chest. Pius XIV, still smelling of wartime cologne and secrets. His heart was cold, leathery, tasting of Auschwitz ashes and Swiss bank vaults. I tore it free and forced it between my teeth. The choir faltered. I swallowed. The taste was childhood, incense, fear. The first time I realized priests could lie, I moved to the next. John XXIII's heart soft and round, tasting of olive oil and the Second Vatican Council's broken promises. Then Paul VI's heart shriveled and bitter, tasting of the smoke that entered the church and never left, one after another, hands that had crowned kings, absolved murderers, signed concordats with devils, now reached for me in supplication as I devoured what they had become. With each heart I swallowed, memory flooded in, the weight of the triregnum, the loneliness of the apostolic palace at 3 a.m., the knowledge that God had stopped answering centuries ago. I wept as I ate, tears mixing with papal blood on my chin. The child inside me grew frantic, kicking so hard my spine cracked anew. It understood. I was eating its inheritance, 266 hearts. I finished the last, Innocent III's, whose heart tasted of the Fourth Crusade and children sold into slavery. With 7 seconds to spare, the choir's song died mid-note. The headless popes collapsed, empty cassocks folding like deflated balloons. Silence. My own heart, now the size of a walnut, beat once, twice, then stopped. I fell to my knees in the puddle of mingled blood and myrrh. The child inside me went very still. Then it began to laugh, with my mouth in perfect, forward Latin for the first time. Mother is strong now. If somewhere in your chest you just felt a sudden, hollow ache, as though something precious was torn out and eaten, do not mourn. It only means your seat at the table has already been set. Night 12 is over. The banquet has only begun. Chapter 13, Night 13. The archives become the Leviathan. The silence after the banquet lasted exactly 7 heartbeats, mine, because the popes no longer had any. Then the floor exhaled, not a sigh this time, a wet, tidal inhale that sucked the blood, the cassocks, the very air toward the center of the basilica. I felt it in my hollow chest first, a vacuum so complete it inverted my remaining lung, folding it inside out like a glove. My raw muscle body slid across the marble, heels scraping, fingers clawing for purchase that no longer existed. The walls began to breathe, stone rippled, frescoes melted downward in long, weeping streaks. The bronze serpents of the baldacchino uncoiled, slithering into the growing darkness beneath the dome. The dome itself dilated, iris of black water opening wider and wider until the sky above was only a memory. I understood, with the slow, dreamlike certainty of a man watching his childhood home sink into the sea, that the Vatican Secret Archives had never been a building. They had been a mouth, and the mouth had decided to close. The floor fell away in sheets, revealing not foundations, but flesh, pink, glistening, veined with gold, like the key that started everything. The 85 kilometers of shelves were teeth, molars the size of cathedrals, now gnashing shut in slow, inevitable rows. Books tumbled into the abyss, pages flapping like dying birds. I slid with them, down the slick slope of what had once been the nave, past confessionals that now gaped like gill slits, past cardinals' corpses liquefying into chum. The crowned child inside me curled tight, terrified for the first time, tiny fists pounding against my diaphragm in frantic Morse code. Mother, mother, don't let it swallow us. The slope became a tongue. I landed on the uvula, a vast, pendulous thing the size of a cathedral spire, slick with mucus that smelled of every secret ever confessed and never forgiven. It quivered beneath my weight, tasting me. Gastric juices rose from the throat below in slow, deliberate waves, clear at first, then greenish, then black, bubbling with half-dissolved relics, miters, bones, the melted faces of saints. I stood at the very back of the mouth, raw muscle steaming in the acid mist, and looked down the throat of the Leviathan that had worn the Vatican like a mask for 2,000 years. Far below, at the bottom of the esophagus, something glowed, the last page of Liber Noctis Papae, the page I had torn out and hidden inside my own hollow chest 11 nights ago, thinking I could deny the ending. It fluttered there like a trapped moth, waiting. The tongue bucked. I fell to my knees, fingers sinking into soft tissue that tried to suck me under. Acid lapped at my thighs, dissolving muscle in fizzing sheets. The pain was distant now, almost nostalgic, like remembering a childhood fever. The child inside me began to cry, not the triumphant laugh of the banquet, real tears, hot and human, leaking from my eyes even though I no longer had tear ducts. It was afraid, afraid of the dark, afraid of being unborn. I felt its terror as my own. For one impossible moment, I loved it, loved the monster I had carried, fed, married, crucified for, loved the thing that would wear my skin on the throne and remake the world in our image. I reached inside the cavity where my heart had been and drew out the final page. It was warm, wet with my blood. The ink had run into a single word, repeated over and over. A child's scrawl, mater, 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 mother. The uvula convulsed. Acid rose to my waist, my chest, my neck. I lit the page, not with fire, with the last thing I still possessed, the memory of belief. I remembered kneeling at 7 years old, terrified of hell, whispering, Jesus, I love you, into my pillow because I thought it might save me. That memory ignited. The page burst into pure white flame, cold as starlight, bright as the host held aloft at elevation. I stood. The Leviathan screamed, a sound that cracked the sky open and let the real stars bleed through. I took one step forward, onto the tongue that tried to cradle and crush me at once. Another step, acid reached my chin. I opened my mouth, what was left of it, and spoke the first forward Latin I had managed since the wedding night. Take this, all of you, and eat of it. Then I shoved the burning page down the beast's throat. The fire caught instantly. White flame raced along every vein of gold, every shelf tooth, every confession ever whispered in the dark. The Leviathan convulsed, throat closing, trying to swallow the light and choke on it at the same time. I fell with it, down the burning esophagus, past melting popes and screaming cardinals, past the child inside me, reaching out with tiny hands that ignited like paper. We burned together, mother and child, lock and key. The last thing I felt was the page curling into ash against something that might have been a heart. The last thing I heard was the beast screaming my name in every language ever spoken in prayer. And beneath it, very small, very human, I'm sorry, Mommy. If somewhere in the dark you just smelled smoke that has no source, if your throat suddenly burns with a light you can't explain, close your eyes. It's only the last page finding its way home. Night 13 is over. The book is finished. Chapter 14, Night 14, the 14th bell and the eternal reset ash. Nothing but ash. And the taste of it on a tongue that no longer belonged to me. I floated in the gray, weightless, neither breathing nor needing to breathe. There was no pain, only an immense maternal ache, the hollow grief of a mother who has carried a child for 9 months, only to watch it burn alive in her arms. The Leviathan was gone, the archives were gone, the Vatican, the world, perhaps time itself, reduced to this drifting silence. Then the first bell tolled. It did not come from any tower. It came from inside the ash, inside what was left of my soul, a single, flawless note, pure as the moment before original sin. With that note, the ash began to swirl. It coalesced, condensed, and birthed a body, mine, but younger, 28 years old, the age I was when I first stepped into the archives with arrogant certainty. Skin unbroken, eyes bright with academic pride, that Elias opened his mouth to scream. But the sound never came. The second bell tolled, and he crumbled back to dust before the cry could leave his throat. 25, 22, 18, still in seminary black, face soft with the last remnants of belief. 15, knees bruised from chapel floors. 12, 10, 7. Each toll stripped away a year, a lie, a scar. Each rebirth was more innocent, more fragile, and therefore more terrified. The boy of 10 remembered nothing of the nights to come, and so feared everything. The child of 7 reached for a mother who had never existed. 11 tolls, 12, 13. On the 13th toll, the ashes formed a fetus, curled tight, umbilical cord of golden script, still attached to the last burning page of Liber Noctis Papae. Then the 14th bell. The sound was not a bell at all. It was a heartbeat, the first heartbeat of the universe, the heartbeat God used to speak creation into being. It rolled through the ash like thunder through a womb. The fetus unfolded, a baby, newborn, perfect, skin still wet with the fluid of whatever hell had served as placenta. Tiny fists opened and closed, legs kicked. The mouth shaped the universal O of every infant's first cry. But the eyes that opened were not human. They were solid black, polished obsidian. No whites, no pupils, only depthless voids that reflected nothing and everything at once. The infant Eliasa smiled, a small, gummy, ancient smile that knew every secret I had ever tried to bury. He rolled onto his belly with surprising strength, pushed up on chubby arms, and crawled through the ash toward the recorder, the device that had survived fire, acids, teeth, crucifixion, birth, and death. It lay there, red light still blinking faithfully. The baby reached it. Tiny starfish hand pressed the record button. His first words were perfect, clear, spoken in the voice of a child who had never been innocent. Night 1 begins again. He looked straight into the lens, straight through the lens, straight into you. Thank you for watching. The black eyes blinked once, slowly, like a cat that has finally caught the red dot. The screen went dead, absolute black. Then white text began to appear, one letter at a time, as if typed by fingers too small for the keys. Turn off your device now. A pause. The letters rearranged themselves, faster, frantic. It already knows you finished the series. Another pause. The screen flickered back to life. The baby was closer, much closer, filling the frame. Black eyes inches from the lens. He placed one palm against the inside of the screen. The glass bulged outward, as though the device itself were pregnant. A tiny handprint appeared on your side of the screen, wet with ash and something warmer. The baby leaned forward until his forehead touching the glass from the inside. Your reflection from the outside, and whispered, soft as a lullaby, "See you soon, Mommy." The recording ends, but somewhere in the dark of your room, a bell is tolling for the 15th time, and something very small, very new, and very old is learning how to open its eyes inside you. The screen stays black for exactly 14 seconds. No sound, no breathing, only the soft, wet click of a newborn learning how to swallow. Then the picture returns. But it is wrong. The camera is no longer on the floor among ashes. It is being held, cradled in two tiny, perfect hands. The baby Elias fills the frame, sitting upright with the impossible strength of something that has never been limited by muscle or bone. His skin is luminous, almost translucent, beneath it. Golden veins pulse in the exact pattern of the Vatican's underground tunnels. The black eyes reflect your room, your face, the exact time on whatever clock is behind you. He smiles wider. The recorder's timestamp begins to roll backward. 13:59, 13:58. He lifts one chubby finger and presses it against the inside of the lens. Your screen ripples, as if the glass has turned to water. A single droplet of clear fluid appears on your side, right where his finger touches from the inside. It is warm. He speaks again, voice still a child's, but now layered with every pope who ever damned a soul. Thank you for staying until the end. Most people stop at night 7. They feel the maggots. They close the tab. They think they've escaped. He leans closer. His forehead touches the glass from the inside. Your reflection distorts, stretches, begins to match his. You didn't stop. You wanted to see how far it went. You wanted to know if the baby would be born. The timestamp hits 00000. The screen goes black again. This time the blackness is absolute, deeper than any monitor should be capable of producing. In that darkness, you hear breathing, soft, steady, newborn, right against the microphone. Then the whisper, so close it might be inside your ear instead of the speaker. Hi, Mommy. Hi, Daddy. Hi. Whoever you are tonight, I kept count. You watched every second. That means you said yes 14 times. The contract is sealed. A soft, wet kiss against the lens. The picture returns one last time. The baby is standing now, though he has no legs beneath the waist, only a smooth column of golden flesh that ends in the crowned child's face, upside down, smiling up at its own infant self. 2 heads, 1 body, perfect symmetry. The infant head tilts. Close the video now and I'll let you keep your name. Leave it open 1 more second. The crowned head speaks with my adult voice, the one you haven't heard since night 10, and I'll wear it tomorrow. The timestamp freezes at segundo 1. The baby raises both hands and places them palm flat against the inside of your screen. 10 tiny handprints bloom on your side, warm, wet, spreading. The final text appears, typed by fingers that have already learned your keyboard layout. Good night. See you on night 1. Bring milk. The video ends, but the recorder light on your device is still blinking red, and somewhere in the dark, a very small voice is learning how to say your name backward, perfect Latin.